The autumn sky over Pittsburgh hung gray and heavy, steel mills glowing orange against the coming dusk. Louise Brennan stood at the threshold of Ashford Steel's employment office, her hand trembling as she reached for the door handle. Behind her, 5-year-old Thomas pressed against her worn skirt, his small fingers gripping the fabric with the quiet desperation of a child who'd learned not to ask questions. She couldn't lift her head. 3 months of rejection had taught her to expect closed doors and averted eyes. Widows with children were inconvenient. Abandoned wives were shameful. She was both. The door opened before she could knock. A clerk gestured her inside with barely concealed impatience. Last interview of the day. Make it quick. Louise stepped into a world that smelled of leather and pipe tobacco. The office stretched before her, all dark wood and tall windows. And there, behind the hiring desk where she'd expected a manager, sat a man in shirt sleeves reviewing papers with careful attention. Victor Ashford. She recognized him from newspaper sketches. The steel magnate himself. She froze. Men like him didn't conduct interviews. Men like him barely acknowledged people like her existed. Victor looked up. His pen stopped mid-word. For a long moment, he simply stared. Louise fought the urge to run. Thomas's grip tightened on her skirt. Something shifted in Victor's expression. His eyes held a recognition that made no sense, a pain that mirrored her own. He set down his pen with deliberate care. "Please," he said quietly. "Sit down." His voice was gentle. Louise had forgotten men could sound like that. She moved to the chair. Thomas pressed against her side. Victor's gaze drifted to the boy, then back to her face. She forced herself to meet his eyes for one brief moment before looking away. "What's your name?" Victor asked. "Louise Brennan, sir." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "And this young man?" "My son, Thomas. He's 5. He's quiet and good. He won't be trouble if you hire me." Victor leaned back in his chair, through the windows behind him. The mills cast their perpetual glow. Louise had stood at similar doors with her mother once, a lifetime ago, before marriage, before everything fell apart. "What kind of work are you seeking?" "Mrs. Brennan." She swallowed hard. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Any kind that feeds my boy." "Sir." The words hung in the air between them. Thomas shifted closer to her, and she felt his hunger as keenly as her own. The landlord's final notice waited in her pocket. Tomorrow they'd be on the street. Victor's hands rested flat on the desk. Strong hands, scarred from old labor despite his current position. He studied her with an intensity that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. "Then let me offer you something better than work," he said. Louise's head snapped up. The kindness in his voice struck harder than cruelty would have. She'd learned to expect nothing. This felt dangerous. "Sir, something better than just work, Mrs. Brennan." Victor's gaze held steady. "Let me offer you hope." Louise couldn't breathe. Hope was a word for other people. People whose husbands didn't vanish in the night. "I don't understand," she managed. Victor stood, moving around the desk. He kept his distance, as if sensing she might bolt. "I'm not offering you a position as housemaid or cook. I'm offering you training." Training. The word felt foreign. "Come to my home. Bring Thomas. I'll teach you bookkeeping, business management, accounting principles." He spoke as if this made perfect sense. "In 1 year, I'll help you establish your own enterprise." Louise's mind raced through every possible trap. No wealthy man made such offers without expecting payment of a different kind. She'd heard stories, seen what happened to desperate women who trusted too easily. "Why?" The question came out sharp. "Because you need more than a job that barely feeds you." Victor's voice remained steady. "You need skills that let you build something lasting." Thomas tugged her hand. She looked down at his thin face, his 2 large eyes. The grocer had stopped extending credit 2 weeks ago. I can teach you numbers, Victor continued, but I can teach you something more valuable first. That you're capable of more than survival. Louise shook her head. Sir, I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's investment. He returned to his chair, giving her space. I need an assistant I can trust. Someone with intelligence and determination. You have both. You don't know me. I know you walked through that door. Victor's gaze held hers. I know you're still standing when others would have given up. That tells me everything I need to know. The mills outside the window belched smoke into the darkening sky. Louise thought of the cold room she could barely afford. The landlord who'd stopped pretending patience. What would you want in return? She forced herself to ask. Your time, your effort, your willingness to learn? Victor paused. Nothing else. Ever. The last two words carried weight. Louise searched his face for deception and found only certainty. I don't believe you, she whispered. That's fair, Victor nodded. But believe this someone should have made this offer to my mother 30 years ago. Maybe she'd have lived long enough for me to thank her. The pain in his voice was real. Louise recognized it because she carried the same weight. Abandonment left a particular kind of scar. Thomas pressed his face against her side. He was always so quiet now. Too quiet for a 5-year-old. Why would you do this for a stranger? Louise asked. Victor met her eyes. Because someone should have done it for my mother. The words settled between them like a promise. Louise thought of the eviction notice, of Thomas's hunger, of 3 months walking Pittsburgh's streets collecting rejection like stones. What if I fail? Her voice barely worked. Then you'll have learned something valuable anyway. Victor pulled out a piece of paper, wrote an address. Come tomorrow morning. Bring whatever belongings you have. There are rooms for you and Thomas. Louise took the paper with shaking hands. The address was in a neighborhood she'd only seen from a distance. I'll work hard, she said. I'll earn this. I know you will. Victor stood. One more thing. Mrs. Brennan, when you walk through my door tomorrow, lift your head. You've done nothing to be ashamed of. Louise tucked the paper into her pocket beside the eviction notice. For the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. It felt dangerous. It felt like hope. The next morning, Louise stood outside Victor Ashford's home with their 2 battered bags and Thomas's small hand in hers. The house rose before them. 3 stories of brick and tall windows. Nothing ostentatious, but solid, permanent. Thomas stared up at it with wide eyes. Is this real? Mama, I think so. Sweetheart. Louise smoothed his hair. Remember what we talked about. Be polite, be quiet. Don't touch anything unless Mr. Ashford says you can. The door opened before she could knock. A housekeeper stood there, middle-aged and stern-faced. Louise braced for dismissal. Mrs. Brennan. The woman's voice was neutral. I'm Mrs. Halloway. Mr. Ashford said to show you to your rooms. My rooms, Louise echoed. Yours and the boys'? Mrs. Halloway stepped aside. Mr. Ashford left instructions. You're to be treated as his assistant, not hired help. Louise entered slowly. Thomas pressed against her side. The foyer stretched before them, all polished wood and morning light. A staircase curved upward. Mrs. Halloway led them up 2 flights. The rooms she showed them were larger than any place Louise had lived since childhood. 2 bedrooms connected by a small sitting area. Clean. Warm. Windows that actually closed properly. Mr. Ashford wants you to know you're not a servant, Mrs. Halloway said, her tone softening slightly. You'll take meals with him. Your son can explore the house. There's a library he particularly wants the boy to see. Psst. Louise set their bags down carefully, afraid this dream would shatter if she moved too quickly. Thank you, she managed. Mrs. Halloway nodded. Settle in. Mr. Ashford will meet you in his study after lunch. When she left, Thomas rushed to the window. "Mama, look! You can see the whole city." Louise joined him, gazing out over Pittsburgh's sprawl. The mills glowed in the distance. Somewhere down there was the cold room they'd left behind, the landlord who'd sneered at her tears. "Why is he being nice to us?" Thomas asked. Louise had no answer. She'd spent the night expecting a trap, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Nothing made sense. That afternoon, she found Victor in his study. He sat at a massive desk covered with ledgers and papers. When she knocked, he looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Brennan, please, come in." She entered, leaving Thomas in the library with instructions to sit quietly. Victor gestured to a chair beside his desk. "I thought we'd start simply," he said, pulling out a fresh ledger. "Basic accounting principles. How to track income and expenses." Louise sat, her hands folded in her lap. "Sir, I need to understand. Why are you doing this?" Victor set down his pen. For a moment, he looked past her, seeing something she couldn't. "My father left when I was 7, he said quietly. "One morning he was there. The next he was gone. My mother tried everything to keep us fed. She stood at doors like you stood at mine yesterday, begging for work, accepting scraps." Louise's chest tightened. She knew that story. She was living that story. "She died when I was 15. Victor's voice remained steady, but pain flickered across his face. Exhaustion, shame, poverty. I watched her break under the weight of it all. "I'm sorry," Louise whispered. "I built this company with my hands." Victor looked at his scarred palms. "Worked the mill floors, learned every job, saved every penny. I thought success would erase what happened. It didn't." He met her eyes. "Last year, there was a scandal. Business partners accused me of fraud. It wasn't true, but the accusation taught me something. I'd become the kind of man who counted money instead of souls." Louise understood then. "So this is redemption." "No." Victor shook his head. "This is remembering what matters. My mother needed someone to offer her hope. I can't help her anymore, but I can help you." Outside the window, the first snow of winter began to fall. Louise watched the flakes drift past, thinking of all the doors that had closed in her face. "My husband left when I was 6 months pregnant," she said. "His family took everything. My parents disowned me for the shame of it. Then we've both known abandonment." Victor's voice was gentle. Louise looked at the fresh ledger, the sharp pencils, the tools of a trade she didn't understand yet. She thought of Thomas downstairs, surrounded by books, of rooms that were warm and safe. "1 year," she said. "You're giving me 1 year to learn this." "Yes. And then you'll help me start a business. I promise." Louise ran her fingers over the ledger's clean pages. Through the window, snow blanketed the city. Winter was beginning, but something else was beginning too. She took a breath and lifted her head. "Then teach me, Mr. Ashford, I'm ready to learn." December settled over Pittsburgh with bitter cold and short days. Louise woke each morning in rooms that felt impossibly luxurious, still half expecting to find herself back in that freezing single room with Thomas shivering beside her. But the warmth was real, the safety was real, and every morning, Victor met her in his study to teach her the language of numbers. "You're a natural at this," he said one morning, reviewing her practice ledgers. "See how you caught that discrepancy? My own accountant missed it last month." Louise felt heat rise to her cheeks. Praise was unfamiliar. "I just followed the columns like you showed me." "You did more than that. You understood the logic behind it." Victor smiled. "You're learning faster than I did." She wanted to believe him, but years of shame had taught her to doubt kindness. Thomas adapted more easily. He'd discovered Victor's library and now spent every afternoon curled in the window seat, sounding out words from books far above his reading level. Sometimes Victor would join him, reading aloud in a voice that made stories come alive, Louise watched these moments from the doorway, her heart clenching with something between gratitude and terror. Thomas was bonding with a man who might disappear. She'd seen it happen before. "Does the boy like adventure stories?" Victor asked one evening, catching her watching. "He likes anything you read to him," Louise said before she could stop herself. Victor's expression softened. "He's a good child. Bright, curious. You've raised him well despite everything." "I've barely raised him at all." The admission escaped before she could cage it. "I've just tried to keep him alive." "That's more than many do." Victor set down the book he'd been holding. "Mrs. Brennan, may I ask you something?" Louise tensed. Here it came. The price. "Why do you still flinch when I speak to you?" The question landed like a blow. Louise looked away. "I don't—" "You do." His voice held no judgment, only observation. "Every time I make a suggestion or offer praise, you brace for something else." Louise's hands twisted in her lap. "In my experience, kindness from men comes with conditions." "I see." Victor was quiet for a moment. "I gave you my word. Mrs. Brennan, I meant it. There are no conditions here beyond what I stated. No hidden prices. No expectations beyond your learning." She wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to. "Time will prove it," Victor said gently. "Until then, I'll keep being consistent. That's all I can offer." The next week, Victor's accountant visited. Mr. Patterson was a thin man with sharp eyes and skeptical expression. When Victor introduced Louise as his assistant, Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Your assistant?" "Yes. Mrs. Brennan has a gift for numbers. I'm training her." Patterson looked Louise over in a way that made her skin crawl. How progressive. But Victor's voice remained firm. "Her mind is sharper than mine. I'm fortunate to have her." Louise felt something crack open in her chest. He'd defended her to his associate without hesitation, as if her worth was simply fact. After Patterson left, Louise found her voice. "Thank you for what you said. I only spoke the truth." Victor returned to his desk. "You solved that revenue discrepancy yesterday. Patterson's been puzzling over it for a week." December deepened. Thomas grew bolder, exploring the house with increasing confidence. One evening, Louise found him and Victor building a house of cards in the library, both concentrating with identical expressions of determination. "Careful," Victor murmured. "One more level." Thomas placed the final card with surgeon's precision. The house held. "We did it." Thomas's face blazed with joy. Victor grinned. "Excellent work, partner." Louise watched from the doorway, her throat tight. Thomas had never known his father. Never had a man treat him with patience and respect. That night, after Thomas was asleep, she stood at her window watching snowfall. Victor's consistency was wearing down her defenses. She was learning to hope, learning to trust. It terrified her more than poverty ever had. January arrived with deep cold that froze the rivers and turned Pittsburgh streets to ice. Inside Victor's home, warmth and routine created their own small world. Louise sat at the study desk late one evening, working through a complex set of accounts Victor had given her. He sat across from her, reviewing contracts, occasionally glancing up to watch her work. She'd grown comfortable in his presence. The constant tension had eased into something gentler. Sometimes they worked in companionable silence for hours. "I can't make these numbers balance," she said finally, frustration creeping into her voice. "Let me see." Victor came around to look over her shoulder. Louise pointed to the discrepancy. "Here. The quarterly expenses don't match the monthly totals." Victor studied the figures. His brow furrowed. "You're right. Something's wrong." "Maybe I miscalculated." "No." His voice sharpened with interest. "Look at this entry, and this one. Someone's been doctoring the books." Louise leaned closer, following his finger. Suddenly she saw at the pattern he'd missed, hidden in the complex calculations. There, she said, excitement overriding caution. Every third month, there's a phantom expense, small enough to overlook individually, but over a year it adds up to thousands. Victor stared at the ledger, then at her. I've been looking at these books for 6 months. How did you see that in 20 minutes? I don't know. Louise felt heat in her cheeks. The pattern just appeared? You have a gift for this. His voice held genuine wonder. Mrs. Brennan, you truly have a gift. Something in his tone made her meet his eyes. They stood too close, the lamplight casting shadows across his face. She saw admiration there, respect, something deeper that made her breath catch. Louise stepped back quickly. I should check on Thomas. It's late. He's been asleep for hours. Victor didn't move. Louise. Her name and his voice stopped her. He'd never used her first name before. I wanted to learn bookkeeping so I could work, she said, needing to fill the charged silence. When I was a girl, I begged my father to teach me how to keep his store's books. He laughed. Said women's minds weren't built for numbers. He was wrong. I know that now. She looked at the ledgers spread before them. But I believed him for years. Married a man who said the same things. Let myself become small. Victor's expression held pain that mirrored her own. I spent 20 years building this company from nothing. Worked mill floors until my hands bled. Saved every penny. Clawed my way up from poverty. He paused, looking at his scarred palms. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what mattered. Forgot the boy who'd watched his mother beg for work. Became the kind of man who might have turned her away. What changed? Louise asked softly. The scandal I mentioned. A partner accused me of fraud to cover his own theft. Victor's jaw tightened. The accusations weren't true, but the investigation forced me to examine myself, what I'd become, what I'd lost. So you decided to hire me. I decided to remember my mother. His gaze held hers. To honor what she suffered by helping someone who needed what she needed. Louise understood then. They'd both been shaped by abandonment. Both carried scars from fathers who'd left, from shame they'd worn like chains. Your husband was a fool, Victor said quietly. But his loss gave me something precious. The chance to know you. The words hung between them. Louise felt her heart hammering against her ribs. I should go, she whispered. But she didn't move. Neither did he. Outside, wind howled against the windows. Inside, lamplight flickered across the desk where they'd spent months learning each other through numbers and quiet. Conversations. Louise. Her name again. Softer this time. I didn't expect, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. Mama! They both turned. Thomas stood there in his nightshirt, rubbing his eyes. Bad dream. Sweetheart. Louise moved to him quickly. Grateful for the interruption and devastated by it in equal measure. Thomas nodded. Is Mr. Victor going to be my papa? The question struck like lightning. Louise felt Victor's stillness behind her. Why would you ask that? Her voice came out strangled. Because you smile when you look at him. Thomas's observation held the simple clarity of childhood. Like Mama in the stories, before she found Papa, Louise couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She picked Thomas up, though he was getting big for it. Let's get you back to bed, she managed. She didn't look at Victor as she carried her son upstairs, but she felt his gaze following her like heat. That night, Louise lay awake staring at the ceiling. Thomas's question echoed endlessly. Was Victor going to be his papa? Did she want him to be? Did she dare let herself want anything beyond? Survival, she was falling in love with Victor Ashford. The realization terrified her more than poverty ever had. Because poverty only took things. Love could destroy you from the inside out. February brought new cold and something worse judgment. Louise first noticed it at church. Mrs. Patterson, the accountant's wife, turned her back when Louise tried to greet her. Two other women whispered behind gloved hands, their gazes sliding over Louise with practiced disdain. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd endured worse. But the whispers followed her through the following weeks like shadows. Shameful, she heard one woman say. Living in his house. We all know what that means. Louise kept her head down and her mouth shut. She had 9 months left of Victor's promised year. She could endure anything for 9 months. But Thomas came home from school one afternoon with tears streaking his face. What happened? Louise pulled him close, rage already building. Billy Patterson said you're a bad woman. Thomas's voice shook. He said his papa said you're living with Mr. Victor without being married. That makes you bad. Louise's hands trembled with fury. You listen to me. Thomas, I am not bad. I am working, learning. That's all. Then why did Billy say it? Because the world is cruel to women without protection, Louise thought. Because society would rather see us starve than accept help. That evening, Victor had business associates for dinner. Louise served as his assistant, taking notes on contracts and proposals. She felt the men's eyes on her, their wives' cold disapproval. After they left, she overheard Victor's partner in the hall. Victor, we need to talk about your household arrangements. My household is none of your concern. James, it is when it affects business. James's voice carried through the door. The Pattersons are talking. The Hendersons, half our clients are questioning your judgment. A widow, living here with her child, it's scandalous. Mrs. Brennan is my assistant, a skilled one. What's scandalous about that? You know exactly what's scandalous about it? James's tone hardened. Think of your reputation, your business. This arrangement costs you contracts, whether you want to admit it or not. Louise pressed her hand to her mouth. She'd known this would happen. Known that her presence would damage him. She'd just hoped it would take longer. That night, after the house quieted, Louise began packing their bags. Her hands shook as she folded Thomas's small clothes. She'd learned enough to find legitimate work now. A bookkeeping position somewhere. It wouldn't pay much, but it would be honest. She couldn't let Victor lose everything because of her. Thomas woke to find her packing. Why are we leaving? We've imposed long enough. Louise kept her voice steady. It's time to stand on our own feet. But I don't want to leave. Tears filled his eyes. I like it here. I like Mr. Victor. I know, sweetheart, I do too. Louise pulled him close. But sometimes we have to do hard things. She sat at the small desk and began writing a letter. Her hand cramped as she tried to express gratitude she couldn't quantify. Mr. Ashford, thank you for your generosity. You gave me skills and hope when I had neither. I've learned enough now to find my own way. I won't let your kindness cost you everything you've built. Please don't try to find us. Remember me as someone grateful, not someone who brought you ruin. She signed her name with finality. Tomorrow, before dawn, they'd slip away. It was better this way. Cleaner. Louise didn't hear the footsteps in the hall. Didn't know Victor had been standing there, listening to everything. Mama, Mr. Victor is at the door. Thomas whispered suddenly. Louise turned. Victor stood in the doorway, his face unreadable, in his hand. He held the letter she'd been writing. She must have left it downstairs. Going somewhere. Mrs. Brennan. His voice held quiet devastation. Louise lifted her chin. You heard James. I won't let you lose contracts because of me. I've learned enough to find work. We'll be fine. Will you? Victor entered the room, closing the door behind him. And where will you go? What work will you find that pays enough to feed and house you both? That's not your concern anymore. Like hell it isn't. The curse shocked her. Victor never cursed. You think I care what James Patterson thinks? What those gossiping fools at church say? You should care. They're your business, your livelihood. And your... Victor stopped. Something crossed his face. You're the best decision I've made in 20 years. Louise shook her head. I bring you shame. Scandal. I always knew I would. Women like me. We poison everything we touch. Stop. Victor's voice cracked like thunder. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. Thomas pressed against Louise's side, watching with wide eyes. I heard what Thomas asked last night. Victor continued, his voice dropping. About whether I'd be his papa. Do you know what I wanted to say? Louise couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Yes. The word hung in the air between them. I wanted to say yes. Outside. February wind howled against the windows. Inside. Louise felt the last of her defenses crumbling. I won't let you sacrifice everything for us, she whispered. Then don't leave. Victor moved closer. Stay. Let me prove that some things matter more than contracts, more than reputation. Stay, and let me show you what really matters. The winter storm hit that night with fury. Wind screamed against the windows. Snow fell so thick Louise couldn't see the street below. It felt like the world had narrowed to just this room, this moment. These impossible words hanging in the air. You don't know what you're saying, she told Victor. In daylight, you'll see reason. I've never seen more clearly in my life. He stood before her, steady as stone. Louise, I've spent 20 years building an empire. I thought success would fill the emptiness inside me. It didn't. Nothing did. Until you decided to play savior to a desperate widow. Until I met someone who reminded me what strength really looks like. His voice roughened. You walked through my door with nothing but your son and your dignity. You'd lost everything, been abandoned, shamed, cast out, and you were still standing. Barely. Louise whispered, That's my point. You were barely standing. But you hadn't fallen. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what kind of courage that takes? Louise shook her head. She didn't feel courageous. She felt terrified and small and so tired of fighting. I thought this was charity, she admitted. I thought you pitied me. It was never charity. Victor's gaze held hers. From the first moment, I saw your strength, your intelligence, the way you protected your son with everything you had left. That's what I needed to see, to remember in myself. What do you mean? Victor looked at his hands. The scars, the calluses that remained despite years of wealth. That scandal I mentioned, the partner who accused me of fraud, he was right to call me out. Just for the wrong reasons. You said the accusations weren't true. They weren't. But they should have been. The admission came hard. I'd become the kind of man who counts money instead of souls, who measures worth by profit. Who would have turned my own mother away if she'd come to my door? He met her eyes. Do you understand I'd become the monster I swore I'd never be? The kind of man my father was. Cold. Calculating. Dead inside except for the ledgers. Louise understood because she'd felt the same thing. The slow death of hope. The numbing of everything except survival. You gave me something I'd lost, Victor continued. Purpose that mattered. Every day, watching you learn and grow and start to trust again. I remembered why I built this company in the first place. Not to prove something to the world. To honor my mother. To be the kind of man who helps instead of hurts. Yeah, now you're losing contracts because of me. I don't care about the contracts. The intensity in his voice shocked her. James can find other partners if he wants. The Pattersons can gossip until they're blue. None of it matters compared to this. To you and Thomas. To what you've given me. What have I given you? I've brought nothing but trouble. You've given me hope. Victor's voice broke slightly. You've trusted me despite every reason not to. You've let me into your son's life. You've worked beside me and challenged me and made me laugh for the first time in years. That's worth more than every contract in Pittsburgh. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Louise felt years of armor cracking. I'm afraid, she whispered. Of what? Of wanting this. Of believing you. Of letting Thomas love you, and then... Her voice failed. And then I leave like his father did. Victor finished gently. Louise nodded, tears burning her eyes. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you. Victor said, I'm human, flawed. I'll make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never abandon you. Never walk away when things get hard. I know what that kind of pain does. I'd die before inflicting it on you or Thomas. You say that now. I'll say it every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes for you to... Believe it. Victor's voice steadied. Louise, I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking you to let time prove me. Stay. Give me the chance to show you that some men keep their promises. Louise looked at their packed bags. At Thomas, who'd fallen asleep against the headboard, exhausted from emotion. At Victor, who stood before her offering something she'd thought was lost forever. Trust. Partnership. Hope. I thought it was charity, she said again, softer this time. I thought you were paying a debt to your mother's memory. I was. At first. But you're not my mother. Louise. You're you. Brilliant and fierce and stronger than you know. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the past and started being about the future. Our future, if you'll have it. I don't know how to do this. The admission cost her. I don't know how to let someone close again. Neither do I. Victor smiled slightly. But maybe we can learn together. The way we learned the ledgers. One step at a time. Louise looked at the window. The storm was breaking. First light showed at the horizon, pale and clean. The world washed new by snow. She thought of the letter she'd written, the goodbye she'd planned, the fear that had driven every decision for months. Then she thought of Thomas asking if Victor would be his papa, of Victor's patience teaching her numbers, of the way he'd defended her to his associates without hesitation, of consistency and kindness and the slow rebuilding of trust. All right, she whispered. All right. We'll stay. Louise met his gaze. But not because I'm desperate. Because I choose to. Because I want to see what time proves. Victor's face transformed. Relief and joy and something deeper flooded his expression. That's all I ask. And Victor. Louise's voice strengthened. I don't want to be saved. I want to be seen. If we do this, we do it as equals. Partners. I wouldn't have it any other way. Thomas stirred, blinking sleepy eyes. Are we staying? Louise looked at Victor. At the man who'd offered hope when she had none. Who'd taught her that kindness without conditions existed. Who'd believed in her when she'd forgotten how to believe in herself. Yes, sweetheart. She smoothed Thomas's hair. We're staying. Through the window. Dawn broke clear and bright. The storm had passed. The world gleamed with possibility. March arrived with the first tentative thaw. Ice melted from the eaves. Mud replaced snow in Pittsburgh's streets. The city woke slowly from winter's grip. And inside Victor's study, Louise reviewed plans for her future. 1 year. They were approaching the 1-year mark of Victor's promise. Time to help her establish her own enterprise. She should have been excited. This was everything she'd worked toward. Independence, capability, the means to support herself and Thomas without relying on anyone. Instead, she felt like someone had carved out her chest. What do you think of this location? Victor pointed to an address on the map spread between them. Good foot traffic, near the financial district. Close enough that you could walk here if... He stopped. If you wanted to? Louise studied the map without really seeing it. It's fine. Just fine. Victor's tone held forced lightness. Mrs. Brooks, that's hardly the enthusiasm I expected. She'd become Mrs. Brooks again lately. Somewhere in the last month. They'd retreated to formality. Building walls before the inevitable separation? I'm grateful, Louise said. You've given me everything you promised, more than I dared hope for. But she met his eyes. But nothing. This is what we agreed to. I learn a trade. You help me start a business. In a month, I'll be on my own. Is that what you want? The question hung between them. Louise looked at the plans scattered across the desk. A bookkeeping consultation service. Her name on the door. Her rules. Her life. Everything she'd dreamed of when she stood at his employment office a year ago. It's what I need, she said carefully. To know I can stand alone. That I'm not dependent on anyone's charity or kindness, or love. The word dropped like a stone. Louise's hand stilled on the papers. You've been generous. You've taught me everything you promised. But I need to prove to myself that I'm capable, that I can make my own way. I've never doubted your capability. I have. The admission came hard. Every day. Every lesson. I've waited for the moment you'd realize you'd wasted time on someone broken. Someone who brings nothing but scandal and shame. Louise. The whispers haven't stopped. Victor. Mrs. Patterson still cuts me at church. Your business partners still look at me like I'm something dirty. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't keep costing you. Victor stood, moving around the desk. He knelt beside her chair so their eyes were level. Do you know what you've cost me? Louise couldn't speak. Sleep. His voice gentled. You've cost me sleep because I lie awake thinking about you. Peace of mind because I worry about you working too hard. My precious solitude because Thomas has filled my library with his questions and laughter, and the house feels empty when you're both gone, even for an afternoon. He took her hand. You've cost me my isolation, my loneliness, my certainty that I was better off alone. You've cost me everything I thought I wanted and given me everything I didn't know I needed. Victor, I don't want you to go. The words came raw. I know we agreed to a year. I know you need independence. But Louise, these months working beside you, watching you grow confident and capable, seeing Thomas thrive, he stopped, gathering himself. I don't want you to go. Louise felt tears burning. I don't want to go either. Then don't. But I know what you need. Victor's grip tightened on her hand. You need to prove you can stand alone before you choose to stand beside someone. I understand that. It's wise, necessary. Then what are you saying? I'm saying we do both. Victor's voice strengthened. We establish your business exactly as planned. Your name, your rules, your success. You prove to yourself and the world that you're capable of independence. And then, when you're ready, if you're ready, I'd be honored if you'd consider building something else with me. Victor's eyes held hers. A partnership, a family, a life. Louise's heart hammered. You're asking me to marry you. Eventually, when you're ready. When you've proven everything you need to prove to yourself. He smiled slightly. I'm a patient man. Louise, I can wait for you to be certain. What if I'm never certain? What if I'm always too afraid? Then I'll wait anyway. Because you're worth waiting for. The study door crashed open. Thomas burst in, his face alight with excitement. Mama, Mr. Victor, look what I can do. He held up a book, opened to a page covered in numbers. I solved all the problems in the back. The accounting ones just like you taught Mama. Victor and Louise both laughed. the tension breaking. Thomas rushed over, climbing onto Victor's knee as naturally as breathing. "That's excellent work," Victor said, examining the page. "Everyone correct. Will you teach me more after Mama leaves?" The question hung heavy. Louise saw Victor's face tighten. "Your mother's not leaving," Victor said quietly. "She's starting her own business, but she'll still live here, with us, if that's all right with her." Thomas turned to Louise, hope blazing in his young face. "Really? Mama, we're staying." Louise looked at them, at Thomas, who'd finally found security and joy, at Victor, who'd offered her hope when she had none, at the papers spread across the desk representing everything she'd fought for. Independence didn't mean isolation. Strength didn't require being alone. She could build her own enterprise and still choose this man, this life, this family they'd created from broken pieces. "Yes, sweetheart." She reached out, and Victor took her hand. "We're staying, all of us." Thomas threw his arms around both their necks. His laughter filled the study, bright and whole and free. Outside, the March thaw continued. Ice cracked. Water ran. Spring pushed through frozen ground, inevitable and fierce. Inside, 3 people sat together in the lengthening light, a family not of blood but of choice, of trust built slowly, of hope that multiplied. May morning broke warm and golden over Pittsburgh. Louise stood at the threshold of her own office. Her name painted in crisp letters on the glass, Louise Brennan, Bookkeeping Consultation Services. Her office, her business, her name. She ran her fingers over the letters, still hardly believing they were real. 4 months since opening, and she already had more clients than she could handle alone. Businesses throughout Pittsburgh sought her services. Her reputation had spread not through Victor's connections but through her own skill. She'd proven what she needed to prove. She could stand alone. She just didn't want to anymore. Louise entered the office, setting her bag on the desk. Morning light streamed through the windows. Account books waited for her attention, a life she'd built with her own hands. But by evening, she'd returned to Victor's home. Their home now. Officially, they'd married last month in a quiet ceremony with just Thomas and the minister present. No grand celebration, no need for one. The papers had been signed not out of scandal or necessity, but out of choice. She was Mrs. Victor Ashford now, but she kept her business name as Brennan. Her independence, her identity separate from his. Victor understood. He'd insisted on it. "Actually, you're not becoming part of my life." He'd said the night before their wedding, "I'm becoming part of yours, equal partners." A knock at the door pulled Louise from her thoughts. She looked up to see a young woman standing there, a small child clinging to her skirts. The woman's head was bowed, her shoulders curved inward with defeat. Louise recognized that posture instantly. She'd worn it herself a year ago. "Can I help you?" Louise asked gently. The woman lifted her head slightly. "I was told you might have work, or know someone who does. I can clean, cook, anything that pays. What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. And this is my daughter, Emma." The woman's voice shook. "My husband left 3 months ago. I've tried everything, but no one will hire a woman with a child." Louise's chest tightened with familiar pain. She stood, moving around the desk. "Mrs. Mitchell, please sit down." The woman took the chair hesitantly. Emma pressed against her mother's side, silent and watchful. Louise saw herself and Thomas in them. The same fear, the same shame. "I'm not offering you a cleaning position," Louise said. Sarah's face fell. "I understand. Thank you for your time. I'm offering you a training position." Louise leaned forward. "An apprenticeship in bookkeeping. It will take time to learn. You'll need to work hard. But in a year, I'll help you establish your own practice, or find a position with one of my clients." Sarah stared at her. "I don't understand. Why would you do that?" Louise smiled, thinking of Victor's words a year ago, of how impossible his offer had seemed, how desperately she'd wanted to believe it, because someone did it for me once. She pulled out a fresh ledger, setting it on the desk. I'm going to teach you numbers, but first, I'm going to teach you something more important. What's that hope? Louise met Sarah's eyes. I'm going to teach you that you're capable of more than survival. That being abandoned doesn't make you worthless. That there are people in this world who help without expecting payment. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to learn, to work hard, to let me help you the way someone helped me. Through the office window, Louise could see across the street to where Victor and Thomas waited outside a bookstore. They waved. She waved back, her heart full. Emma tugged her mother's sleeve. Mama, are we going to be all right? Sarah looked at Louise, question and desperate hope mixing in her expression. Yes. Sweetheart. Sarah's voice strengthened slightly. I think we're going to be all right. Louise opened the ledger, pulling out sharp pencils. Let's start with the basics. Income and expenses. How to track them, how to balance them. As she began teaching, sunlight streamed through the windows, somewhere behind her. She heard Thomas's laughter as he and Victor entered the bookstore. Normal sounds, happy sounds. She thought of the woman she'd been a year ago. Broken, desperate, unable to lift her head from shame. Victor had given her hope when she had none. He'd taught her that kindness without conditions existed, that trust could be rebuilt, that love didn't require losing yourself. Now she was passing that gift forward, teaching another desperate woman that she deserved more than just survival. That capability and worth weren't things you lost when someone abandoned you. Hope multiplied. Healing spread. Sarah leaned forward, studying the ledger with fierce concentration. Emma climbed into another chair, watching with wide eyes. Is this really happening? Sarah whispered. Yes. Louise smiled, remembering asking Victor the same question. This is really happening. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, and in a year, you're going to help someone else the way I'm helping you today. Through the window, spring light painted everything gold. The city hummed with life and possibility. And in a small office with her name on the door, Louise Brennan Ashford taught another woman how to hope. The cycle continued. The generational curse of abandonment transformed into something else, something powerful and multiplying. One act of kindness spreading outward like ripples on water, endless and inevitable and impossible to stop.